Throughout my time doing Sega Lord X, I have had many questions about my favorite horror games. While I can't say very many games have ever truly scared me, I have enjoyed some of the better ones for their story, setting, and style of gameplay. The old Resident Evil style games were great because of the feeling of helplessness and isolation. Being trapped and having to find your way out while being hunted by zombies and other biological nightmares could really instill a sense of dread few other games ever hoped to match. I also really enjoyed the Silent Hill games. They took a similar path as Resident Evil, but added a psychological element to it that changed the feel entirely. Not only were you usually trapped somewhere with limited resources, but you also felt you were losing your mind, a potent combination. There are many other horror-themed releases that I enjoyed as well, everything from classics like Dead Space to multiplayer juggernauts like Left 4 Dead. One thing about me you should know is that while I was young I became enamored with the films of George Romero. Seeing Night of the Living Dead for the first time had a profound effect on my expectations for being afraid. The idea of being trapped in a strange place and hunted by what seemed like an endless flow of monstrous assailants seemed like the worst situation ever to my impressionable young mind. When I saw Dawn of the Dead, it was taken to the next level, because then it became clear that even with all the food, clothing, electronics, and video games you could ever want, we were still destined for failure. When Day of the Dead released, it punctuated just how helpless we'd all be, with the last holdouts of mankind succumbing to infighting that would doom even the best laid plans. These ideas of course transferred to my preferences in gaming quite strongly, so you can imagine how much Capcom's 2006 release Dead Rising appealed to me. In this episode we're going to take a look at that, talk about why I loved it, and why I think it's one of the best horror games ever made. The story begins with our hero Frank West heading into Willamette, Colorado via helicopter, hoping to get a scoop on whatever has the town under a military blockade. You see, Frank is a reporter, and he has a big lead that something huge is going down in this seemingly unimportant town. Frank quickly realizes that something is very wrong and witnesses chaos on the streets below. He watches helplessly as people are attacked and killed by unsympathetic mobs, seemingly at random. Frank, ever the one for an adventure to score the big story, decides to land on the helipad on the roof of the town's indoor mall. He tells his pilot to come back in 3 days to pick him up, and so Dead Rising begins.
Hello there. Huh? You're the reporter, aren't you?
Yeah.
You came alone.
Yeah, I'm freelance. You know, go on the battlefield alone, no crew.
The gameplay here is a mix of action and RPG elements, with the Willamette Mall being your playground. You begin at level 1, weak and pathetic in your meager existence. You die quickly, you can't carry much, and worse, your offensive output amounts to little more than what most grannies could muster. This actually sets up an interesting system of leveling up, so you aren't a worthless POS forever. You get what the game calls PP, or prestige points, for every enemy you fell. Since Frank is a photographer, you also gain PP from the pictures you take, which can play prominently in your game if you so desire. Capture a scene with intense emotion or gore and you get a huge PP bonus. This system of gaining levels is attached to a unique knockout system. Basically, should you die during your time in Willamette, you have a choice of saving your stats and starting the story over, or reloading a previously saved game. This makes for a hell of an interesting time, because sometimes starting over and keeping your levels is preferable to going back to whatever your last save was. As you gain more levels, you become much harder to kill, do more damage to your enemies, and you can carry more items and weapons. But perhaps most importantly, you open up new moves for Frank to perform. These are both offensive and defensive in nature. and includes simple additions like moving through the zombie horde more efficiently to wrestling moves that can take down multiple enemies at once. You're gonna need those too, because in addition to keeping yourself alive, you can also help survivors left in the mall. Many of these people need to be escorted through the zombies, and while you have a measure of control over where they go and what they do, it's your martial might that's the biggest factor in their survival. Luckily, you have one hell of an arsenal at your disposal. You have swords, knives, baseball bats, hockey sticks, rifles, shotguns, handguns, machine guns, swords, axes, and just about every damn thing in between. Each one breaks after a certain number of uses, but they are so plentiful, you easily replace them at a moment's notice. This is one of Dead Rising's greatest assets, the sheer variety in its items. It's not just a huge amount of weaponry you can play with, you also have clothes, food, and many other things scattered around the area to discover. Among these items are magazines that give Frank additional abilities. Some are simple, while others can make your weapons last a lot longer. There are also food recipes you can dabble in that give you various power-ups temporarily. While the picturesque Willamette Mall looks like a great place to play, it's got death around every corner. Not only are there hundreds of zombies spread across each and every area, but the mall also has a collection of psychopaths that are out to stop you. These guys and gals range from doomsday cults to wacko police officers, and each one is a formidable foe. The base game is called the 72-hour mode, or what amounts to 3 days of in-game time. As you explore and the story unfolds, you get case files and secondary missions that must be completed. How you do this has an effect on how things unfold, and can lead to multiple different endings. Some of these endings can cut the game short, while others can lead to additional playtime that tells you the rest of the story. Be cautious, the in-game time limit not only governs the 3-day cycle, but the time limits for the case files and secondary objectives as well. If a mission should expire before it's finished, it's lost for good. If a case file expires, it could potentially be game over for you.
Oh, God, it's you. Look, don't sneak up on me.
Brad was attacked. I located him on the monitor. Ugh!
It's probably just a sprain.
I've gotta help Brad, or he's done for.
All right, fine. Give me your gun.
When it comes to the visual presentation, Dead Rising really pushed the genre in terms of number of enemies on screen at once, and the size of the environments they inhabit. Each area is loaded to the brim with zombies, items, and other things you can interact with. The mall itself is huge and gorgeous, a combination of traditional American design motifs and the zaniness you expect from such a product. There's gun shops, antique stores, clothing boutiques, food markets, and many other types of places for you to explore and discover new things to use in your quest. There's a few ways for you to play this game today. There's the original 2006 release for the Xbox 360 and the updated multi-platform remaster that hit the PC, PS4, and Xbox One 10 years later. The remaster, of course, has a number of improvements, including higher resolution, better performance, and increased save slots. But honestly, even the original release of this is still plenty impressive. Willamette Mall is such an incredible set piece all its own, loaded with personality and a feeling that it could exist in the real world. There's even vehicles for you to plow through your enemies, their broken bodies and gore-laden limbs covering the ground in the aftermath. Part of what made this so appealing to me was its graphics engine. Not only were you trapped with no immediate escape, but you are literally in jeopardy at every turn because enemies are rarely ever more than a few feet away from getting their blood-soaked fingers on you. Most of the audio here fits in with what you'd expect of a contemporary zombie game set in a shopping mall. Lots of elevator music, grunts, groans, and growls fill the air as you explore. Some of the areas and psychopaths even have their own ballads that play when you interact with them. It also has a great ending credits song I always enjoyed. Let's have a few examples so you can hear what I'm talking about. So, the story setup is solid, the graphics and sound are on point. Is this the perfect zombie game? Like every piece of software, the power of its appeal lies mostly in its gameplay. You can spend hours playing about with costumes, weapons, and food, or just executing the undead by the thousands. Frank has a huge arsenal at his command, both in hand-to-hand combat as well as melee and projectile-based options. There's just so much here to discover. The story also has an appeal that can't be overlooked. Aside from the previously mentioned setup, you'll meet a number of interesting characters that have their own motivations, both good and evil. Your fate depends on what you do and how you do it, and it's possible to play this and not get the full scoop on what's really going on. In fact, the worst ending has you discovering nothing at all. There are a few things that keep this from perfection, however. Escorting survivors comes with a huge learning curve. Getting these folks to safety at first can irritate the hell out of you because they just don't seem to listen. They don't fight well and run headlong into zombies, seemingly unafraid to die. You must finesse these folks by babysitting them every step of the way. There are commands you can use to tell them to stay or move to certain areas, and you must use this effectively to have a chance at saving everyone that needs it. There's also the matter of psychopath battles. While these are fun and an important part of the Dead Rising experience in the long run, they can be infuriating at lower levels, or should you not have the proper weapon. Don't be deterred by failure, and don't be afraid to restart the story. As long as you save, you will keep your level progress and the moves that you have unlocked. And the stronger you are, the more experience you have, the easier this game becomes. In fact, once you learn its ins and outs, it becomes quite easy. Your main concern will then turn away from simply unlocking its story and learning how to complete the game 100%, including rescuing all the survivors. This is no small task, and will take some time to learn the best ways to do it. But in the end, as long as you do not let frustration overcome you, the fun factor here is beyond reproach. The setting is just perfect, and the gameplay gives you so much to do, your attention never wavers. The best part of this is that it embraces its absurdities and doubles down on them. For every serious thread, there are equally hilarious opposites that always keep the humor strong. I love this diametrically opposed duality. On one hand, you have what amounts to a true survival horror situation. Hordes of the undead everywhere, and your life threatened at every step. And then you have the over-the-top psychopaths, ridiculous costumes, and countless other humorous additions that swing the tide of horror to comic relief. To its credit, it takes a page out of Romero's playbook in this regard, as he loved to inject comedy and poke fun at humanity with some sharp social commentary and satire. Dead Rising does the same, and it's one heck of a ride for it.
What are you thinking? Get off!
I'm saving you, baby! Wait for me, sweetie! Madonna!
I break out Dead Rising every year around this time. I enjoyed it all those years ago and still enjoy it today. It has lost nothing with age. The setting, the gameplay, and everything in between is about as perfect as the zombie genre offers for my taste. Even with its frustrations, there is just so much to do and so much fun to be had, it takes quite some time to see it all, particularly its many endings and saving all the survivors. It also may be of interest to you film fans that the owners of the Dawn of the Dead movies actually sued Capcom over Dead Rising here, saying that it copied their material. Capcom won that battle as the idea of a zombie siege in a mall cannot be copyrighted, and the movie studio failed to connect any other element of Dead Rising to its films. There was also a Wii game called Dead Rising Chop Till You Drop, but it's a shadow of what made this one great, including a massive downgrade in visuals. There have also been numerous sequels, including a complete reimaging of Part 2 called Off the Record, which sees Frank return as the main character. I enjoyed all of these, but none of them quite lived up to the fun I had with the original. Capcom bottled this magic in a very similar way as the original Resident Evil trilogy. The setting was special, and the adventure so fantastical, it became an amalgam of pure joy. There had never been much like it before, and even with its sequels and side stories, it still commands some serious respect from this zombie fan. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.